Welcome everyone to another episode, Lara Maker. I'm really happy to be having here this interview with Raphael from FabMan from Vienna. Hi Raphael, how you doing?
Hi Cesar, I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. And we always start our interviews kind of ice-breaking, asking what is your superpower?
My superpower. Knowing lots of different ways to make hardware do things. Like I'm a software developer by trade, and I done everything from small embedded devices to banking software, mobile, web apps, everything. Yeah.
Okay, so you are kind of software MacGyver, kind of being able to do all kind from the very little to the planes. That's a really interesting superpower, just to help you manage and automate things. That it's really interesting. So you are, like you said, you are by trade like a software developer. How did you get engaged with the FabLabs that are more like usually related to digital fabrication, to physical stuff? How was it?
Friends of mine started a project to make an autonomous sailboat, like back in 2005 or 2006. They were interested in competing in a competition for autonomous sailboats, and they asked me if I want to help with the software, as I'm a software developer, because they weren't. I know nothing about sailing. I knew nothing about hardware back then, but I was already a proficient software developer, so they asked me if I want to help with the software system, which is quite important for an autonomous sailboat.
And did you have a FabLab in your city by that time? Was there any kind of lab?
No, there was no FabLab. That's what was one of our problems. Like when we started the project, we started it in our school back then. We were on the technical school, and we just had a room there where we worked. But as the project grew and more people got involved, and the boat got bigger, we needed a space to work. And so my friends Karim and Roland just founded Happy Lab in Vienna, which was just a small basement back then.
And from this space, it grew and grew to become one of the biggest one. How big is how it evolved to and grow with the new users?
Yeah, it started with just a few friends in a basement, and then more people got interested, more people got involved, and we quickly outgrew our old space. So Happy Lab moved to a bigger space, and now we have around 1,700 or 1,800 active members in Vienna. And so it's a big community. It's like 0.1% of the whole people in Vienna are members of Happy Lab.
Wow. And so it started with a boat, but I imagine it evolved, and as more as it grew from the original members or the original founders, more people were developing their projects there. So right now, nowadays, what kind of projects are people doing? Like if I came this afternoon to Happy Lab, what could I find? Like,
I have no idea what you would find, because there's so many different people that are doing so many different things. Like we have people from all age groups, from small children to old people, to all kinds of social backgrounds. We have students and entrepreneurs and families and everyone. Like we have some students who make their models for technical university, like some architects. We have entrepreneurs working on their Kickstarter projects or startup ideas. And we have families making T-shirts for the kids together. Or I saw a woman with a kid recently who made a mobile for her kid on the laser cutter. People build their furniture there, everything. Yeah.
And how does it work in terms of membership? Like, is it an independent entity? Are you self-sustainable? Are you part of another big entity or company? How does it work for new people to apply and pay for a membership? Or
that's the interesting part of Happy Lab, that it's completely self-sustained, self-funded. We're not part of a university or any other corporation or anything. We're just a bunch of people who started the lab. And at the beginning it was a small non-profit, and now it's the Happy Lab GmbH, so it's a business. And people can join. The membership fee started €9 a month. So if you pay €9 a month, you can access all machines, but only during a limited time during the week. And if you need more time, you can get bigger packages to get up to 24/7 full access to the lab.
And so I imagine we haven't talked about FabMan yet, but I imagine it's all tied together. Like you can like buy packages like so many hours of laser cutting or CNC or.
It's even easier. You can use all the machines as long as you want. You don't pay for the machine time. You can if you're a member of FabLab, you can use the machine all the time if you want, as long as it's available, and you don't pay for laser time or anything. You just pay for material for 3D printers, and for the other machines you have to bring your own material, and that's about it.
That sounds really interesting, and well, given the size and the number of members, I think that's part of the success. But let's go back to FabMan. Can you explain what FabMan is for people that haven't? That is the first time that they learn about this management solution?
Sure. FabMan is a software and a hardware to make managing a FabLab easier and safer. So we have a software that lets you manage your members and your machines and lets you book equipment and do all the invoicing and billing and so on. And we have a hardware, our FabMan bridges, we call them, that you use to connect your machines to FabMan. And then you can control who can turn on which machine and when, for example, that only people who had training on the CNC mill can turn on the CNC mill. And if they haven't had training, they can't turn it on. And for example, on laser cutters, a very important feature is Deadman Switches. So if you turn on the laser cutter and go away, we turn off the laser cutter if you don't respond within a few minutes. It's configurable, but for example in FabLab you have to state if the laser is really on, if the laser is active, you have to swipe your member card on our hardware on our bridge every 3 minutes. If you don't do that, we warn you, and then we turn off the laser cutter, because we had a big fire in FabLab back in 2010, I think.
So I think that was part of the inspiration to launch.
Exactly. That's what launched the hardware project, the big fire. Yeah.
And I found really interesting this idea, like you have kind of a list of members and just record who is trained into a particular machine. So you do some user management.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really interesting that because you have this infrastructure in place, you can allow people just or you can open the space 24/7 without the need of.
We control even our door locks with our bridges. So we have one of our bridges at the front door, and you swipe your member card there. And if you have a 24/7 package, for example, you can enter the lab anytime. If you have, for example, we have packages for weekdays. So if you have a package for Monday, you can enter the lab on Mondays, and not on other days. And we use this on all the machines, so you can control that like people have a Monday package, can use the laser cutter and all other equipment on Mondays, but only on Mondays. And on Tuesdays it doesn't work, and so on.
Okay, that's very very interesting. The more you talk, the more curious I am about all these different elements. So let's start with the bridges, because for most people would say, okay, but what is in the box, or how does I imagine there is some kind of NFC or RFID card reader inside there. There must be some connection from the modules to a control server.
Yeah, sure.
What's in the box?
Let's start with the simple one, the simple stuff. Like, how do you connect it to your machine? The simple stuff. We have like a power cord comes out of the bridge that you plug into the wall, and a power socket where you plug your machine in. And then so we sit between the machine and the power socket, the wall socket, and so we control the power of the machine. That's the simplest integration. And then we have lots of inputs and outputs, so you can make tighter integrations with certain machines. So we don't switch off the power. For example, for our CNC mill in FabLab, we don't switch off the power. We just switch off the spindle motor. So we can stop the spindle, but we don't shut down the whole CNC mill. So you have to recalibrate and something. So you can integrate it very tightly with the machines if you want. But the basic setup is just plug the power into the bridge and plug the bridge into the wall socket. And what's inside? Yeah, we have a display where we show all the information. We have an NFC reader in there. Yeah. We also supported some older standards like an RFID and a precursor to NFC, but now they all support NFC. And we have, for the technical interested people, we're running on the ESP platform. So we have an ESP8266 in them, and relays and tons of hardware.
Oh, I imagine. As I said, the more you talk, the more ideas I get. So the first thing that popped into my mind that you talk about the power cords, is there any kind of dead power switch? I mean, like some people would say, oh, I'm not authorized to use this machine. I can just unplug it and just do a kind of a hackery stuff, or, well, dangerous stuff.
Yeah, we don't prevent that. If you're concerned that your members might unplug, at FabLab we just have a policy. If you mess with the safety system in FabLab, that's a clear violation of our policy and you're out. That's it. If you try to circumvent the safety systems, you're putting yourself and others in danger, and you're gone. But if you're concerned that your people might do that, you can also directly connect the machine to the FabMan. So without using power plugs, but you can directly connect the FabMan bridge to the mains.
Okay.
And put the machine connect the FabMan directly with wires to your machine. And then still people could open the FabMan and use it. But this is like, those are really, that's malicious.
That's the thing. That was one of the things I was wondering, that there is also this kind of having all people aware that this is the thing that enables the place to run.
Yeah.
I mean, that you could do that very stupid stuff and then get you into real trouble and get other people in real trouble. So
yeah, exactly.
There's this kind of social agreement, like this is part of the things we need to make this work.
Yeah. If you can't get some basic social contracts to work in your lab, then I think you have very different problems. Like if you can't make people agree, like these are the rules of the lab, stick to the rules. If that's a problem, then you have completely different issues.
Totally. No, and I think it's also very, very interesting, this idea of having people being aware that of the things that are needed to run the operations on a daily basis. You know,
it also helps, like the for example, the Deadman switch on the laser cutter, that you have to stay at the laser cutter or we turn it off. Like this is not because we think people are evil or something, but like you forget, you get a phone call, you go outside, or some things happen, and then you have a fire. Like if you talk to people who've run a lab for a long time, many of them have had fires sometime. Yeah. That's just what happens with laser cutters if you don't stay next to them. So that's why we enforce it, and people respect it. It's annoying, but it keeps the safety up, and that's important, especially if you have that many members.
And I think it works better than tape on the floor, because I've seen some people like laser cutting stain area. You have to stare in this rectangle in the floor if you're laser cutting. But like you said, then someone rings on the door, then you need to go to the toilet, and then just and I'm going to take a coffee, and I'm going to print something, and then it gets really messy really fast.
Yeah, exactly. And even if people are in the area and not paying attention, you can still have problems. So the fact that they actually need to stand up and swipe their card at the bridge prevents them from just, I don't know, putting earbuds in and watching YouTube for an hour while the laser cutter starts to burn.
That's a really, really good point. And we have talked about the bridges, but let's talk about the software part, kind of the platform. How does it run? Where does it run?
It runs on our servers in Germany, so it's based in Europe. And you just sign up on the website and you use the whole system via the website. So we have very fast, nice web apps where you can manage your users and connect everything, manage everything, have a look at who used which machine and when, and manage all your billing and so on.
Okay, so imagine like I'm a new FabLab that want to start with laser cutter, CNC, and 3D printer and coffee machines, because coffee machines connected are always lovely. What could be like to start, like using FabMan to manage my lab?
So you just go to fabman.io, so it's fabman.io, and click on sign up, and just enter your email address, pick a password, and tell us the name of your space, and that's it. And then you're ready to go. We have a free trial. We even send you a bridge for free if you want to experiment with it. We just ask for a deposit, so we know we get it back if you're not interested. And then you can experiment with it. And if you're interested, you just tell us your payment details and keep going.
FabMan.io. And well, one of the things that people might be wondering right now is like, what if my internet connection goes down?
Sure.
How do I open my door? How does it work if I go offline?
Yeah. If for like we have a fallback system, because of course these things happen. So any admin can turn on any machine at any time. So if you're an administrator keys, they are known to the bridges even if it's offline. So if it's offline, any administrator can still turn on any machine, can still open any door, and so on. And if people are currently working on the laser cutter, for example, and your internet connection gets lost, they still can continue to work on the machine. Like the Deadman switch stays active, all the safety features stay active, but you're working like you can, no other member can take over, but you can still finish your work while the internet is not there, and that's it. So that's usually sufficient. And we encourage people to use it's really cheap nowadays to have a router that falls back to 3G or LTE if your main line drops, and then it's no issue whatsoever. Yeah.
And in terms of user management, like you were talking about how people can be like, you can like create a new member, assign permissions, and you told us before that people the system would recognize like training. Is it
exactly?
In a way?
That's a common thing. Like it's really difficult and cumbersome to remember who is allowed to turn on which equipment. So in FabMan, if you offer training courses, you just add the training courses to the system, and then you can say like, Cesar did the FabLab bootcamp on the 1st of March. And because he did the FabLab bootcamp, he's now allowed to turn on the laser cutter, the CNC mill, the 3D printer, and so on. Or he just visited the laser cutter training, so he can turn on any laser cutter in our lab. So you just keep track of who did which training and when, and this allows people then to turn on the equipment. In addition to the packages, so you can say you have training on the laser cutter, and you have a package for Monday. So now on Mondays you can turn on the laser cutter.
That's very interesting. And I don't know if you're also managing reservations.
Yes, sure. So both the admins and the members can book equipment, and you can define very fine-grained booking restrictions, like people can only book during the opening hours or only outside the opening hours. That's, for example, in HappyLab, during opening hours where everyone can come. We don't want the equipment to be fully booked, so we don't allow reservations during opening hours. But members go to the website, just book equipment, and we charge for the booking. Like HappyLab charges the members for the booking. So you can tell FabMan, if people book a machine, it costs such and such euros per month, euros per hour, for example.
Okay.
And FabMan automatically charges them.
It's automated. Like, I mean, the manager doesn't need just to
No, it's automated.
Put a sign or whatever. If someone else tries to use the machine, they will get a message, this machine is booked now.
That's the great part. Yeah, the bridges enforce the bookings. So at the beginning, we had issues like people booked machines online and in HappyLab, and then you get your tools and your equipment. You go to the laser cutter, and someone else is there. But hey, I booked this machine. Yeah, I just need 10 more minutes, and you get discussions at the laser cutter because the 10 more minutes are never 10 more minutes. They're 15 or 20, and the people started arguing next to dangerous equipment. So that's nothing, and it harmed the community. So now we enforce the booking. So if you book a machine and someone else is still using it, they get an information like there's a booking coming up in 30 minutes, for example, or in an hour, and they have time to finish their job. And as soon as your booking begins, only you can turn on the equipment, and no one else. But another issue.
Okay.
If people book a machine for 3 hours and then don't show up because they're sick or they forgot or whatever, you can tell the system that if people don't show up, allow others to use the machine after 15 minutes or after an hour. So if you don't show up for a certain amount of time, we the machine is not blocked. So because this is for our laser cutters run all the time. So if someone books a laser cutter for 3 hours and doesn't show up, you have a lot of angry people waiting in line.
So I'm very curious because here we are talking about a complete solution that is based on hardware and software, and most of the people that listen to Laura Maker also have this kind of mix of profiles where they are either developing apps or IoT or electronics or whatever. So I'd like to know more about the part of the business model or the sustainability model. Like, what have you learned? Because as we keep on talking, it's very interesting to see how the system evolved just to cover most common issues or our management situations for the FabLabs. There is a lot of value there on things that you have learned all these years. And I like to know, like, what have you learned while developing FabMan? Like, what has surprised you? What you were not expecting there?
You mean when developing FabMan as a product?
I mean that most people, maybe someone right now is like trying to develop like something similar, not just to manage FabLabs. I mean, it could be like robotic boats on demand to whatever, and they need to create a solution that is indeed is a quite complex solution in terms like you have some products on the cloud that need to communicate in kind of real time with hardware sensors distributed in several locations and managing complex equipment and keeping track of a lot of stuff. So
like,
what did you
for
learn?
us the most difficult, like, our lesson is don't underestimate how difficult it is to make hardware at a certain scale. Like it's fairly easy to make 1 piece or 5 piece, but to get into the 100 pieces, it's a completely different skill set. You need so many different things you have to keep track of and to think about, and and certification and molding and so tons and tons of stuff we did not expect to be that not necessarily that difficult, but that there's so much you have to do. Like I know software. I've been a software developer for almost 20 years now. So all the software part is basically that's my trade. I know that one, but hardware was a completely different thing.
It's curious because I got when I was in Fab 13 in Shenzhen in China. I was talking with David Lee from the Shenzhen Open Innovation Lab, and he got this very same idea. Like, it's not that hard to do a prototype or a 3D printer and build your own, but here in China we are like thinking you master something when you are able to create 1,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's kind of the starting point. Like, oh, I have something. Oh, this is the prototype. No, prove me you can build 1,000, and then I believe you have mastered how to do this stuff. So it's quite.
And the difficult part is also like you need completely different tools and approaches to do 10 pieces of something, or 100, or 1,000, or 10,000. Like everything changes. Like the processes that you use change. That was the most difficult part for us.
And along we made like couple of, I think it was 1.5 years or 2 halves or 2 years ago, a review of software to manage the FabLabs. We cover like several different alternatives, and from what I've seen, like the business model also has evolved. Like from that time, you told us, okay, you can start like kind of for free, and then we rent or lease the bridges. Before it was different. How has it evolved in all these years? Because
and we can also talk about how FabMan came about, actually, like where it came from. But let's start with the business one.
Okay.
Like initially when we launched, we charged labs based on the amount of users they have. So the more users you had, we had different plans, and the more users you had, the more you paid per month. And we talked to lots of people, and we got lots of mixed feedback for that. Because like in Happy Lab, we thought it was straightforward, because in Happy Lab, we know how many members we have, and we know our growth rate because we've been here for over 10 years. So we know roughly how many members we have and how many we're going to have in 3 months, a year, and so on. But for many labs, that's not the case, either because they don't have a classical membership like we have, but they have like anyone can come and work on the lab. So they don't know how many users do I have. It can fluctuate a lot. And so it was hard for them to estimate how much FabMan is going to cost them. And so we heard this feedback for a while, and then we decided, okay, let's switch. So now we don't charge you per user. You can have as many users as you would like. We charge you per equipment, because it's much easier for people to think about, like, okay, and even they know, okay, I can start with just the laser cutter. I can manage all my members and so on, and I just add the laser cutter for safety. And if it works fine, then I add the CNC mill. And so I can decide for myself when I want to take it to the next level, instead of being dependent on how many users work now.
Yeah, and it's easier to say how many laser cutters do I have than
exactly. So I know I have 10 machines that I want to connect to FabMan, so I know exactly what I'm going to pay for as long as I have those 10 machines without any fluctuations. Yeah.
Okay, so it changed a lot, and I think that when we were talking last time, it was one of the ideas that was in the air, that was some kind of steps, and if you were like on the boundary, it was really complex to manage. Like, oh, I have 75 members, then if I got 76, I like get a lot of kind of
exactly. There were large steps between the packages, and it's exactly like, if you have 79 members, you pay that much, and if I get another member, I have to pay much more. Do I want another member, or do I like exactly? It created lots of problems, so that's why we switched, and we got really good feedback for the new model.
That sounds really, really interesting. And you were you got this idea, like, let's start explaining how FabMan became like thing, or
yeah, sure,
please.
So because like we didn't start with the idea of a startup, hey, let's build something for labs. Like, Karim and Roland founded the FabMan, founded the Happy Lab back in 2008, I think. And it grew over time. It grew. They had to move to a new place. They got more and more members, and they realized that it's creeped up on them that over time you have less time for projects and people, and you have more time for bureaucracy, spend on bureaucracy and managing the members and keeping track of who had training on which machine and doing all the invoicing and billing, and you don't have time for your community anymore. So they started to automate things. So Karim basically started to hack together a bunch of scripts to automate all the annoying stuff, so they have more time. And then they had the fire at the laser cutter that I told you about. So they thought, okay, we need a safety mechanism. So they started to build the first generation of these hardware boxes that we now call FabMan bridges, and put it next to the laser cutter, and gave everyone a member card so they could turn on the laser cutter if they had permissions and so on. And so it grew over time in the Happy Lab. And because Happy Lab is so old and it's self-sustained, self-funded, which is quite rare with many Happy Labs, so we can survive just due to the membership fees. We don't need like a university to back us or apply for lots of grants and so on. So many people from across Europe and across the world visit Happy Lab to see how they're doing it, and they saw the system and they said, we need this. We have the same problems. We have the same problems with needing lots of staff to keep the lab safe, or needing lots of volunteers, and having all the bookkeeping and accounting and membership management, and it's just annoying. So we have the same issues. We have the same safety issues? We had a fire. We also had a fire, and so on. So they wanted our system, and then Karim and Roland just came to me because they knew I was a software developer, and said, let's try to make this into a product. And then we started over. We threw away all the hacked PHP scripts and built a solid foundation, built a solid hardware foundation, and developed FabMan back in 2016. We started. Yeah.
How many people are you right now working on FabMan?
We have 4 people right now, and we're looking to hire someone pretty soon. Yeah.
That sounds great. This conversation is, the more we talk, the more questions just pop to my mind. Like, for example, as you were talking about pain and bureaucracy, I was thinking about GPDR. Do you know this?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. That's something that we can. It was also quite a lot of work for us, of course. But now we can help you with that because like you don't have, you can, if you use FabMan, we take care of most of the GDPR stuff, like automatically forgetting stuff, which is important. Like you can say, okay, just delete all the access logs every, that's older than 6 months or 3 months or whatever, backup, data safety and so on. Those are big issues with GDPR.
Yeah, that's a big pain in the ass.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it's also really helpful. Like it's good to know that as a user, I'm quite happy that GDPR is here. And
sure.
So, but for businesses, it creates a lot of work. Yeah, but
as we were like exploring GDPR, I got this kind of explanation. Yeah, but GDPR, why this so complex? Why there are so many things? And I said, it's not that complex in terms of the main idea is if you have any kind of personal data and someone asks how this came into the system and why do you have this data, you should be able to explain that. And it was like, oh, it's not that complex. No, the idea is not complex, but being able to kind of trace and manage all this complexity is a really hard task without tools.
And there's more, like you have to exactly tell everyone, like, what kind of data do you store? How long do you store it? How do you keep it safe? What do you do if there's a data breach? How do you allow people to remove this data and so on? All these things. And there's a lot of...
Yeah, there are a lot of technical aspects, but I think that the main idea is it's really powerful to put the user in the center of the privacy issue. It's like, why maybe my lab is keeping information about something I made 5 years ago after I no longer remember what's happening with my personal data, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it created a lot of awareness in businesses because as you try to be GDPR compliant, GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation, by the way, because we never said it.
Oh, yes.
As you try to be compliant to this EU rules, you start to think about a lot of things, so, like, okay, how long exactly do we keep backups, and should we delete them maybe automatically because they might contain sensitive data, or how do we restrict access to certain data and so on. So I think it's as I talk to other business owners and so on, many of them complained about GDPR, but at the same time, many of them got aware of privacy issues and safety issues because they had to deal with it due to GDPR. So
we have been talking about business model, about how it works, and I like to know, like, what has been your biggest obstacle, what has been the hardest thing. Like, we talk about the hardware in terms of like making it work. I don't know if maybe the hardest was to scale, maybe it was implied, or
like one thing is making the hardware in a way that you can make it at scale. That's one thing. And the other big thing that like we struggle with is making people aware of FabMan. Like the people who use FabMan, we get super good feedback. Like the people who use it for a while are really happy with the system, but lots of people don't know it. Or another thing is difficult. It's not like, I don't know, Shopify or something where you just sign up online and you're good to go and can do everything. Because we have this hardware, it also makes it harder to try FabMan. We have to send you a bridge, you have to wait for it. If you're outside the EU, we have the customs in between and so on. So this is like having a hardware involved makes lots of things much more difficult, but it's worth it for us because it enables us to integrate your hardware in a way that no one else can, and give you lots of safety features and management features and billing features that you can't do without connecting the equipment.
Yeah, I think that maybe another question that just popped into my mind is the language barrier. I don't know if FabMan, I assume it's English.
It's fully in English. We have something German. We haven't really announced yet, but it's gonna be multilingual pretty soon.
Okay.
So right now it's completely in English, but the member portal is gonna be multilingual pretty soon.
Yeah. No, I was more thinking about the messages on the modules. you know, like in our space, like I'd say 80% of users know English, or 80, 85, 90, but I'd say like 10%, if they get the message on the screen and it's in English, they will like say, what?
Yeah.
If it works, it will be like automatically, yeah, okay, let's go. Well, but there are some people like we're going to say, what?
I see. Well, all the messages at the bridge on the bridge display are right now in English, but they're only a handful. Like, you don't have permission. Machine is booked. Swipe your card, things like that. So even if you don't know English, you can distinguish between those 5 probably pretty quickly. But yeah, we're thinking about internationalization because as we target FabLabs, there are not 50 FabLabs in each city. So from the beginning, we knew we're going to be international pretty quickly. And I think our second customer or third customer was already outside of Austria. Now we're all around the EU. So yeah, we have to think about those things.
Okay, can you talk about these success stories? Because I think that after so many years working on this, like having this, like, oh yeah, it's being used right now in this university or this FabLab, it must feel really, really, really well. So maybe you can explain a bit like what have been so far kind of your success stories.
Yeah, sure. Like for me personally, it was great to hear that people really love the system, because one of the reasons I wanted to make a product, like I've been a software developer for 20 years, but mostly in the consulting space, like doing projects for companies, most of them internally. And I always got frustrated that no one was interested in making a really good product. Like if you're consulting for a company for an internal project, for example, as soon as it does more or less what they need, they stop. And you get all these like below, and the years before I started FabMan, I was working in the banking industry, and it's even worse there. Like they build lots of horrible products that no one really likes to use, and that annoyed me so much that I said I want to switch to making a product for people where people pay for it because they like it, not because they have to use, or someone pays for the product and someone else has to use it then, like internally. But like the people who pay for it are the one who use it. So if they like it, they pay for it. So you have a real incentive to make it good, usable, friendly, reliable, and so on. And it was, for me personally, the biggest success was that the people who use it really give me exactly this feedback. Oh, it's really easy to use. It does all the things in a simple and understandable way. It works reliably, and so on and so on. That was my personal success story. And as FabMan, as a company, it's great to see lots of big labs and also small labs, but lots of big ones use it and be really happy with it. Like Makerspace Munich is one of the largest ones. I don't know how many people they have, but they have a huge lab with tons and tons of equipment, and they use it. FabLab Brno has been super happy with it, for example. They were one of the first ones. And Adidas is now using it for an internal lab. So we have some quite people who are quite picky about what they use, and they use it and are really happy. And we have lots of small spaces. Like we have not just Fab Labs. We have a classic what's it called? People who work on wood.
Workshops.
A classic wood workshop who uses it now to share his equipment with other people in the region, other woodworkers in the region, and co-working spaces and universities like in Vienna, the technical, not the university, but the Technikum Wien, which is one kind of technical university, uses it, and ETH Zurich uses it, and so on. So we have lots of international customers, and it's great to get the feedback.
Yeah, I think it shows like that you like kind of first iterations were like you were like figuring out what were the key features, and once that the features are ready, it's like people are like, oh yeah, this is the thing I need. Okay, it works as I expect. So I think that's when you kind of make this kind of product market fit, where you offer it in a way that makes sense for the people, and you're offering the right features, like people are like, yeah, I need this thing now.
Yeah, exactly. But like we're still struggling to get more people to know about FabMan, because we're all technical people. That's why the technical foundation is really sound. But like we don't have big sales or marketing team, so it's more difficult for us to get the word out. Yeah.
That's part of the idea for this interview, like to get it, you know. The more I hear you, the more I'm like going to FabMan and just order one for the for our space. Maybe we are like, maybe you will have like an order soon. So let's go back to the last question of this interview, because I think it's really valuable for people learning about like developing a solution that targets like FabLabs and that enables you to have kind of more free time for your project. That is, I think, the end goal of every maker space FabLab users,
Exactly.
like to devote time to their project. And I'd like to know if you learned something along the way that could be like kind of useful for any makers, even if they are not related to FabMan, like things that you've learned in all these years related to FabLabs, maybe something that has surprised you, something that could be useful for users of the space or to general makers.
I'd say talk to your people, because I'm always surprised, like, when I talk to, for example, when I talk to the lab managers who use FabMan, I'm always interested in, they all get crazy interesting ideas on how to use FabMan for new stuff. But at the same time, if you're a lab manager, like, have time to talk to your people and see how they use your stuff, because there are lots of smart people in Fab Labs usually, and to talk to them how they solve certain problems gives you insights that you wouldn't have thought of. That's the only most general thing I can think of. Like, I'm talking to the lab manager of FabLab has been really insightful for me, like how they do all their business all the day and what they're struggling with and so on. I like to learn these things.
I was thinking about when I checked like a few years ago, like FabMan and all the other platforms I review in that program. One of the things that just stuck into my head, that just popped into my mind right now, it was like most of the platforms are tailored to individual users, but they don't have kind of features tailoring groups. Like it's and I've seen like maybe it's related to this kind of maker mentality that individual makers go to the spaces and do stuff as individuals, but it happens in all platforms. It's like one of the things, like, okay, we are the Arduino group and want to use 3D printers to build some cases, but not for me personally, but as a member of a group. And I was thinking like how these platforms in themselves, like by focusing on individuals, could like either promote or prevent like people working together, you know, in projects.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, this is something we're also thinking about inside Happy Lab. Like, how do you get people together to learn from each other? Because that's valuable. In Happy Lab, we have a very diverse set of people, and to get, if people from different disciplines and different age groups and different needs talk to each other, they can get great ideas on how to solve things. And we're thinking about how we could enable that with FabMan. That's something we're thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest successes in terms of communication. Well, I'm here. I have my split mind. It's like it's super simple in WhatsApp or Telegram or Slack or whatever to create a channel or a group. That has some kind of common resources, and people can join there and do their stuff, and later on maybe abandon it or disappear. You know, like it's quite simple to add these kind of liquid structures that serves on like, oh, we need to get things ready for the festival, so let's create a group, we communicate lots. So maybe this kind of thing could be useful for people. Just, oh, we need to work in a project for whatever installation. And
that's like, some people ask us if FabMan has some community features and so on, which goes in this direction. And usually we say there are so many really awesome things for managing communities, like talk about
Yeah.
WhatsApp or Slack or Discourse or whatever. And we're more interested in connecting them than trying to be another solution for this, because most people have a solution in this space.
Absolutely. No, I was more not like trying to create kind of a forum, because you have Discourse for that, or you have Slack for real-time communication, or mailing list. I was more in thinking in terms of managing resources in the lab as a group, in terms of billing, booking, this kind of thing.
We have this requirement, but I can tell you more about it. Like we also sometimes have like people who pay for other people. Like if you have a company and I'm joining with 3 members, and now I want to pay for them. If they use material, if they use 3D printers, don't charge them, charge us. And we have a solution for that, but it's not yet in FabMan.
No, it's very interesting, because we had that requirement. For example, we had like people like, hey, we are a robotic association in the university. We want to just join the space. And we say, okay, we have individual memberships. Oh no, that's not for us, because we're a group. And it's like, how many people are there? I don't know, from 3 to 35. And it's like, okay. It's like the same.
How do you handle this? Yeah, sure.
How do you handle, like, maybe one day we're 3, maybe next day we're 25. So I think it makes sense.
But like from the perspective of FabLab, they went in the other direction. They had group memberships from the beginning, but they discontinued them. So now they have only individual memberships. I'm not sure about the reasons, but I'm not sure why they did it, but they did it. So it seems like it's not really necessary to support groups. Like you can still, if they have sometimes 35 people, maybe sometimes they need 35 memberships.
I think it's the only way to manage. Okay, so let's finish with our classical question, Aldara Maker. Usually after talking with all people, they have like in our case, like maybe you would like to recommend us to interview someone else and to ask him like some questions. Like I have always wanted to know what Joseph Prusa thinks about machines management or whatever. I don't know. It's like just an open invitation for you to recommend us someone to interview, someone that could be interesting, that could be related to FabLabs makers.
Yeah, sure. His name escapes my mind right now. Give me a second. I have to look it up.
Okay. It always happens. It's the pressure of the moment where it's like.
I was thinking about someone when you said it, and then his name escaped me. Konstantin Leonenko from Goldsmith University. He's we've met him at FabLab, I think, several years ago. I didn't know him until Fab 14, where we also met. And he's a really great, interesting guy. He's now at the Goldsmiths University of London and manages the FabLab there. But he has a quite a rich background. For example, during Fab 14, he just in the evening, he just went to a small cafe where they had some turntables. And he just asked the owner, "Hey, can I DJ for you next evening?" And then he just came and DJ'd. Like he does all kinds of interesting stuff. And so he might be quite a character to talk to. And he's a really nice guy. So I can recommend it.
Do you have any, after Fab 14, do you have any pending questions? Like something that, where did you learn DJing or whatever? Or
that might be a good one. Yeah, ask him this. But also, good question. I don't know. Just ask him anything you can think of.
Okay, I will just go and ask, because I think it's really interesting, like to see how. I think that one of the the outcomes of interviewing so many people is that once you start like talking to makers and fabbers, all have different backgrounds, all have passion for what they do, and all mix all kind of crazy skills. Like, I learned how to cook Italian food or Chinese food, and then I went to do a 3 years course on mountain hiking, and then whatever. It's kind of all these kind of mixes.
Exactly. Yeah, sure.
That make it so interesting.
Yeah.
So this is the end for today. Thank you, Raphael. We will put down here in the video all the links to FabMan and to FabLab, so you can learn more about the project. I think it's really interesting. Most of the spaces, I absolutely agree, have this need to manage more complexity, to be aware of so many things happening, and all the help is always welcome.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. See you next time. Maybe
See
Fab
you.
15.
Sure. Yeah. See you there.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.